Morning, nearly afternoon. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce first webinar linked to our Festival of Business campaign, which is happening throughout the month of June. And it certainly feels like a June month, a June day today with the fantastic weather we've got out of all of our windows. A quick introduction from myself. So my name's Chris Brewerton. I head up as Divisional Director, Sutton Coldfield Chamber, Lichfield and Tamworth. Obviously today is in partnership with our Sutton Chamber, which is great to be here with everybody. I also work linked to the Greater Birmingham Chambers, of which Sutton is a key part of. Mentioned with the Festival of Business, this is, say, the first event of numerous to come. Its headline sponsor is Aston University, and a massive thanks to Aston Uni for their support of the month, which really is there to shine a light on positive opportunities, positive news from throughout divisions, which brings me on to our wider group. For those perhaps who aren't members or aren't aware of how the Chamber sort of works, the Greater Birmingham Chambers is our wider group, and then we have Birmingham, Solihull, Burton, Cannock Chase, Lichfield and Tamworth, Sutton Coldfield as our geographical divisions, and each one of those will have a focus put on it over the next few weeks, and well worth looking onto the website where you registered for this event and looking at other events across the group that are taking place in the next few weeks. We also have our future faces, Asian Business Chamber, Transatlantic and Commonwealth, that are more themed rather than geographical, and again they will have a number of events linked to the Festival of Business as we go through into June, culminating as well with the Global Trade Conference later this month. Quick note on what's to come in the Festival of Business this month. So this week even. So we've got our Regeneration Opportunity in Lichfield with Lichfield District Council and Make It Stoke staffs. We have our Tamworth Spotlight with Tamworth Borough Council and South Staffordshire College on Thursday, and then two events on Friday, one in the morning with Moore Hall, Lee Marston and Belfry, talking about hospitality and really looking at how they as a sector sort of, bounce back, linked to the reopenings in the previous few weeks, and then a similar look in Lichfield and Tamworth on tourism with Visit Lichfield, Tamworth Castle and the Lichfield Festival. So a really interesting week of events, all online, unfortunately, but it means that we can still sort of engage with our members and business. It's great to have everybody with us. And finally, we need to keep mentioning, it's really important, it's our Greater Birmingham Annual Awards on the 20th in late July, with the deadline for applications the end of this week. So if you are looking to apply and get involved, then by all means get your application over. Final note on our COVID-19 support grid and support opportunities that we have been doing for many months now. Still worth very much looking at that. During the pandemic, of course, it was the sort of retention scheme and the various business grants. There's a lot of opportunity now, of which our Speaker at Birmingham City Council will probably touch upon in terms of the recovery and the moving forward out of the pandemic. So well worth looking at that grid. It gives you a really good idea of what opportunities are available and support is available for your business. So we'll come on to today's format. It's an absolute pleasure. We have Simon Ward, leader of Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council. We have Rebecca Farr, Development Planning Officer for Birmingham City Council. And we also have David Smith, Planning Director at IM Properties, which in this sort of room is discussing the Pedimore Birmingham development out near the Asda at Minworth, and a really important part of the development across Sutton Coldfield. We'll hear from all three. Some are wearing stripy tops, some are on holiday and have had to work with their host to get their Wi-Fi up. So it's fantastic to have the three speakers here, and really having sort of spoken at length in the last few weeks. We're really happy to welcome them and hear their sort of really important views on Sutton Coldfield and the surrounding area. If you have got any questions, any topics you want to ask, please do use the chat box in the room to ask those questions as the presentations are being made. Once we've had those three presentations, we'll be bringing together those questions for a Q&A that will be recorded. In a bit of a change from our normal way of sort of doing things, the presentations will run till around 12:30. At that point, there'll be a short 5-minute interval where you're more than welcome to go and grab yourself a cuppa or pop to the loo and then come back. Please do come back, as we will then go into networking rooms where we will, you'll have a chance to speak to one or two of the people, the presenters involved, and also equally as importantly is tell ourselves about your business and who you are, and really try and replicate that sort of reflecting on what's been discussed after the presentations themselves. The delegate list and presentations will be sent round tomorrow with a recording of the webinar to all delegates as well, so you'll get a bit of a follow-up email from tomorrow. So I suppose we can get started now. So I will, gives me great pleasure to introduce a leader of the Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Council, Simon Ward, to start his presentation. And please, as I said, do use the chat box as we're going through the presentations and discussing some of the issues. And we'll look forward to hearing from Simon. Simon, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Chris. Thanks ever so much for the opportunity to speak to everyone this morning. It's great to be on a platform with a virtual platform with Becky from BCC and David from IM as well. Yeah, the regeneration of Sutton Coldfield isn't purely about the town centre, although that's what I'll spend most of my time talking about this morning. It's a holistic thing that requires us to think about the town as a whole, not least because of the challenges that we've been through in the last 18 months. And it's a team effort. And I just wanted to say at this point, thank you to the Chamber for everything they do in terms of advocating for Sutton. I'm privileged enough to have sat on the Chamber Council as well for Sutton, and it's great stuff that you are doing. I just wanted to say as well at the start that it's a team effort, and as a town council, we have to work very closely with Birmingham City Council. Birmingham City Council are very much our partners in this massive regeneration push that we are looking to execute here. And also to say thank you to David, who I've got to know reasonably well over the last couple of years as well. The Pedimore development, the Langley development as well. They are things that people in the town perhaps campaigned against early on, but they are happening. And we really recognise that IM have been very respectful in terms of how they've gone about the development and what they've tried to do, and that it's now going through a really exciting place in terms of what it can bring, I guess, jobs-wise and to the Sutton Coldfield economy. So, as I say, I think IM have been good custodians to get to this point, and we and they will continue to make sure that's the case over the next period as the project develops. Just in my sort of comments this morning, I just wanted to cover two main sort of areas really, and there'll be some people on this call that will have heard me do this first bit before, so to them I apologise. But it is very much a case of putting some context around, I suppose, the town centre regeneration, and then what I want to come on to do is to talk in a little bit more detail about the kind of delivery plan as it now stands at the moment, which again is in its real infancy, but which we can hopefully start to see some of the kind of parts of the jigsaw beginning to move. Although what I'm learning as well is that when you do one of these projects as well, they don't always necessarily move in the order you were expecting them to. But that's an opportunity as well. So I think in terms of what I want to cover today, Jess, if we could just click to the next slide, is to talk about some of the challenges around the town centre and what we've looked to do with the Town Centre Regeneration Partnership. Put the master plan, as I've said, into some sort of context, and now it's an SPD, for which again, technical term, but supplementary planning document, which gives it real teeth, and that's thanks to Birmingham City Council for adopting it as such. And then I guess to show you another document effectively on this call, which is available on the Town Council's website, but which starts to put those jigsaw pieces into context, as I was talking about, in terms of a delivery plan. So just to come back to the next slide, I guess, put some context around the Town Council. So what does the Town Council exist? So we are, Sutton has a rich future, a rich past, should I say, but we are absolutely working for the future to improve environment, local services and facilities. And the town centre sits at the heart of that. And I guess we look at the next slide. What we were doing was, we were saying as a town council, and I guess talking to business people on this call now, we were saying, I guess a couple of years ago now, what is the longer term strategy for Sutton, for Royal Sutton Coldfield as a whole? And we went out and we talked to residents about what they wanted to see from the town council. People are probably familiar. I won't go into the history of the town council, but we've not been around for an enormous period of time, so 4 years. But we went out and spoke to residents and said, what do you want to see in the strategic plan? And it was really clear that they saw a number of big challenges for the town, and the town centre was absolutely top of the list. So if you look at the next slide, Jess, effectively there's our town centre, which well, that's obviously the parade, and I think, you know, if you look at the next slide, in there, what are the challenges that we face? And these are things which I think everybody on this call is probably familiar with. You know, obviously increased competition from online, and the kind of imbalance that sits there between bricks and mortar and online shopping. It was interesting to hear Chris talk about the events with Tamworth later in the week. There is out of centre competition to Sutton in a pretty big way, and Ventura Park is absolutely one of those. And when we did some of the preliminary work, that came across loud and clear. And that feeds into things like a parking strategy, etc., as well, because, you know, one of the reasons people haven't come to Sutton is partly the offer, but also because they can get to Ventura, they think, more easily, and indeed they don't have to pay to park. There has been a lack of investment in the town, for better or worse, in the infrastructure, as well as in the kind of the kind of retail and just building assets generally. Retailers facing increased fixed and rising costs, and then we had COVID. So, you know, there were a lot of headwinds facing Sutton Coldfield Town Centre before COVID, and therefore, you know, all that did, I guess, is make us even more, you know, determined to act effectively. I guess if you look at the next slide, and yeah, just looking at the kind of objectives. What were we doing at a higher level? What was the initial kind of thinking and vision? You know, to come up with a reason, I suppose, and this is not uncommon with town centres that are looking to regenerate themselves across the country, a reason to spend time in the town centre. So yes, some retail, cultural, leisure, civic, you know, catering, reasons to spend time in the town centre that aren't purely around shopping. And that then drops also into residential opportunity, because I think, yeah, what we've seen as well is that there is a real need for increased housing across the country, and, you know, reimagining why people would want to spend time in the town centre. If they're living there, then it's obvious that they're going to spend more time there, and you can see this in some of the other successful regeneration projects that have happened around the country in town centres not dissimilar to ours. But what I think is really important to say as well is that we have got a lot of positives going for us. You know, the ease and quality of access to the town as a whole, the proximity to our park, are all really positive things that effectively put us in a good position, as well as, I guess, the demographic of Sutton Coldfield as well, which makes it an attractive place to invest. So I guess sort of, I don't know, probably 18 months, a bit longer than that, 2 years ago now, we formed, next slide, Jess, we formed the Town Centre Regeneration Partnership. And I can see a number of people on the call this morning, Mike Bushell, Dave Hemming from the BID, representative from the Combined Authority. And really this was a combined effort to pull together all the interested parties in the Royal Town in coming together to work out what a plan should be in terms of regenerating the town centre, and just starting to put it on paper fundamentally. Hello? So that we could then begin to push it forward. Those are the groups that form the Town Centre Regeneration Partnership, and that then led on to the next slide, which effectively was the formation of the formulation, should I say, of the master plan, which came in 18 months, which is relatively quick, I'm told. For someone who spends his time in a day job in business, it felt a bit slow from time to time, but I'm told that's quite quick. There was a lot of consultation that happened there again in terms of talking to the community groups, talking to business groups, talking to the local authorities. Absolutely, what that revolved around is kind of 6 big moves as well. People are probably familiar with that within the master plan. There are discrete projects that have been kind of ring fenced within the town centre. There are opportunities there as well in terms of the transport hub, which you will hear me talk about later on as well, which is an HS2-led investment to move buses and effectively transport hub away from the lower parade. People are familiar with Sutton Coldfield, out towards the station, but that creates a massive opportunity there as well, to effectively make the town centre more modern, more welcoming, to bring in certain of the property assets within the town centre closer to others as well. So that project is ongoing as well. And as I said there, really pleased that last month Birmingham City Council adopted the master plan as an SPD. And on the next slide, just in terms of some of the delivery, so there are some shorter term interventions that I guess are being driven more out of COVID. So the town council, should I say, is looking at improving the civic realm, sort of the public realm, should I say, in terms of certain parts of the town centre at the moment as well. There are discrete projects ongoing in terms of improving particular areas. We're engaging with landowners. Transport is massive in this context, and it's massive in terms of not just, as I've said, the transport hub, but also one of the big moves envisages effectively changing the traffic flow around the town centre to break what the urban designers call the kind of concrete collar, which effectively is the ring road that runs around the centre of the town. There's some big projects there that do require funding as well, and that sort of leads me on to the next. So there's a lot of studies and planning and modelling going on there at the moment, particularly around transport. There are funding applications that are being progressed as well. Particularly, people will probably have heard of the Levelling Up Fund, which is a government fund effectively aimed at supporting generating town centres. So all of that, I suppose, and one of the questions I've been asked since we get through kind of stage one, and it is only stage one, you know, base camp as we face the mountain, is what does delivery look like? And I guess what I was just keen to do to share with people this morning, which is the kind of the next sort of half a dozen slides, Jess, is the delivery plan. And I don't propose to kind of bore you with all of the detail of this, but what it really, if people are interested, and I hope you are, this is all on the town council's website, and it's all available for people to get hold of and have a look. If we just look at the first slide, I think, Jess, this really kind of breaks down into various, hopefully manageable phases, the three sort of key areas. I'm not sure whether people can see this on their screens, but yeah, it takes it over a 5-year period, and there are some projects that we're not even pushing to get done in that period because of certain land ownership, etc. But what we are doing here is transport and highways, development and public realm, and the projects that are dependent on the private landowners. And it's probably just worth me touching on that briefly as well. It's fairly obvious that we have, and we're fortunate that we have concentrated land ownership in Royal Sutton Coldfield Town Centre. So the Red Rose Centre is owned by Birmingham City Council. Grace Church Centre is owned by M&G, and New Hall Walk and kind of that area is owned by the British Rail Pension Fund. Well, they own a very long lease on it effectively. What's pleasing is that their willingness to engage, but actually what we wanted to do was to get the plan in place first before we started to talk to those people as well. So what you can see here on this schematic here is from the left hand side, which is the stuff that's ongoing now, which I talked about, some of the public realm improvements, a particular project around Plantsbrook, which I think could be really interesting as well. People are probably familiar. Plantsbrook is the brook that kind of runs around the bottom of New Hall Walk, and has the opportunity, I think, to be a bit more of a kind of feature. I think the kind of where we've got to with this plan as a whole, or should I say, is it's realistic. It's doing, yeah, it's kind of breaks things down into achievable chunks effectively. I was always told that the transport and highways would be the key to unlock it all, but it would probably be the most complicated bit. But that is all kind of ongoing and being moved forward at the moment. We need the funding as well, but in terms of the planning, that's happening. So I guess, yeah, I think what's important, and you can see here, there is a design and technical stage, which probably takes, I don't know, probably the first kind of 2 to couple of years effectively, and then the delivery stage as well. So yeah, please feel free to pick that from the town centre's website, the town council website, should I say, but that gives a little bit more background and context. I think if we just go to the next slide, again, I don't propose to go through this in enormous detail, but again, I think I just wanted to show to people that there are 17 defined projects that sit at various stages around the town centre. Some are going to be more straightforward than others. Some are going to be, frankly, probably more emotive than others. But I think what's really important, again, is that there is the granular detail that sits behind to move this forward. If we look at the next slide. This also sort of shows, again, some of the interdependence between the various projects. I think it also shows what I was talking about before in terms of the importance of the transport strategy as well. And a key area within that is parking. You know, whilst one of the key objectives that sits at the heart of the master plan is for the longer term to be getting more cycling, more walking, we do have to recognise as well that Sutton Coldfield is a big car owning area, and we ignore that at our peril. And actually, as an aside, one of the things the town council is looking at doing at the moment is subsidising car parking as part of a COVID intervention as well, to get people back into the town centre and to give them a reason to come back into use the shops fundamentally, and into use the leisure and hospitality venues. If we could just go on to the next slide, Jess. I'm not going to go into this in detail. This is all about shorter term projects which look at the entrances to the town and look at creating a better feel as people arrive in Sutton Coldfield, be it at the station, be it at Birmingham Road end of town. The next slide looks at the ones that sort of have more limited dependencies, which is good as well. This talks about areas such as VZ Gardens, which the town council is in the process of transferring from Birmingham City Council at the moment. It also talks about King Edward Square, which is the area in front of the town hall, which would be slated for work. I think it's probably also worth saying, and I'm sure it'll come up later, that Aldi have the pieces on the jigsaw I was alluding to earlier. Aldi have now put in a planning application, which people are probably familiar with, to build a new supermarket on Bressington Avenue, which is at a high level fantastic news. A site that's been so tricky for so long. But actually, what we've then got to do and make sure, and what I'm hoping that we can work closely with BCC, with Becky and the team on there as well, is making sure that that fits in with the objectives of the master plan as well. I think I've probably used quite a lot of my time, so if I just flick through the next slide, Jess, is probably worth. This talks about the kind of next 12 months effectively, so the 12 months after that. There's lots of opportunities there in terms of improving various parts of the town centre, as I've talked about. I think it also illustrates again the importance of the transport and highways work. The next slide is interesting as well. Red Rose Centre, as I've said, is owned by Birmingham City Council. Reimagining what that kind of whole area could be around the Red Rose is a really key part. And again, I just want to say that the town council is really encouraged by the positive kind of indications we've had around Birmingham City Council around what a new Red Rose development as a whole could look like. I'm not going to go into detail on the next two slides because they are really very detailed, but I would just urge people to have a look at those again. And those slides kind of pull together what each project at its highest level geographically within the town is looking to achieve, who the delivery partners might be, how those projects might be funded as well. And that's really all I have to say. I'm absolutely delighted to get feedback from people as we kind of progress through this seminar. And I just say thanks again ever so much to the Chamber for giving us the opportunity to come and chat to people. Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Simon. That's wonderful. Yeah, and I think certainly would stress to look in that in a little bit more detail if you are a business owner or a local resident, and the work and effort that is going into that plan, and where it leaves the town council to be able to start really planning and moving forward alongside the Regeneration Partnership is really positive, and a hell of a lot of work has got into that with Simon and many people involved. So well worth looking at that in more detail, and we'll come on to a few questions around that as we go through the presentations at the end. So if you've got any thoughts, please do add them into the chat, which brings me cleverly on to Becky Farrelly from Birmingham City Council. So obviously, Simon did mention, the BCC at times during his presentation, and I think Becky's here really to give that other wider sort of larger scale view, I suppose, across Birmingham and how that links in with Sutton Coldfield. So Becky, over to you.
Hi, I'm just trying to get my opening slide on the screen. Hopefully that's working all right, Chris. Well, first of all, just thanks ever so much for inviting me, Chris, and allowing me to follow on from Simon, who's usefully given some really good context for things that I'm going to cover in a little more detail. Just by way of introducing myself, I'm Development Planning Manager for North and West Birmingham. So my team cover Sutton, they cover Great Bar, Perry Bar, Aston, Birchfield, North Edge, Aston. So we cover quite a large part of the city. And as Simon has said, there's been a really good team effort in Sutton in particular, with the various partners working around the master plan. I'm not just going to talk about the master plan. I'm not just going to talk about Sutton Town Centre. I'm going to also talk a little more about some of the challenges that we need to address in terms of recovering from COVID and the City Council's role in that, the support that the City Council will be offering across Sutton and obviously across the rest of Birmingham, and also some really big opportunities in the area. So what's our economic recovery strategy? Well, the economic recovery strategy was approved by the council back in the spring this year, alongside a community recovery strategy. Obviously, the successful recovery from COVID is around supporting businesses, but it's also around supporting people. The approach to the economic recovery strategy was to look at what works and what works quickly and effectively, and to really try and build on those things that that have been shown to be successful. And so in particular, the place management and place development, which Simon's already touched upon, and also unlocking and accelerating infrastructure development, are things that are really key to the work that I do. But also supporting people and businesses is something that I'll pick up a little as we go through this presentation. So the following slides really talk about what this means for Sutton, although I'll make reference to a number of projects that are outside of the Sutton area, but probably of significance for this audience, or I hope so anyway. So as Simon's already mentioned, the Town Centre Master Plan was adopted as a supplementary planning document just a couple of weeks ago. This is really important because not only does it mean we've got a very clear vision that's shared by all the partners, but it also supports decision making. So all planning applications will be considered against it. And as Simon mentioned, it's a key tool for funding. One of the key things that we have to show in bidding for any funding, as you'd imagine, is that we have a strategy for what we're doing. And I think the Town Centre Master Plan is a really great example of that, actually. Simon's covered a little about the Regeneration Partnership and how that's structured. And we have a subgroup of that established to look at the Levelling Up Fund and actually ensure that we've got a clear programme to work towards submitting a bid for that and then delivering the work as well. He also mentioned the City Council owned Red Rose Centre, which is an early opportunity where the council can set a direction really based on the master plan for quality of delivery, pace of delivery. And again, we have a group working very specifically around that piece of work, linked in with the Regeneration Partnership. But it's not just Sutton Coldfield Town Centre, that's the heart of the area, but actually there's a number of other centres, aren't there? You know, we have Boldmere, we have Mere Green, and not just shopping areas, but also other business locations. But the City Council has an urban centres strategy. This provides a toolkit really that can be applied to any centre, although the strategy document sets out an approach to 10 centres, including Sutton Coldfield Town Centre. The council, working with partnerships, business improvement districts or otherwise, organisations within town centres, can support those town centres to develop their own strategy, to identify what the key interventions are that they want to make, and help identify funding priorities again within their areas. This has obviously had to be considered in a slightly different light in this post-COVID or nearly post-COVID world, and the role of centres has changed. And I think anyone who uses local centres in Sutton will have noticed that people are shopping locally, and that obviously has a different impact on the main town centre than it does on places like Boldmere, where people are walking more or cycling to their local shops. And that's something that we really want to encourage. It's a really good thing, but it does mean understanding what the nature of different centres is and should become over time. And actually local businesses are absolutely key to understanding what that is and what the needs of local centres are. So that sort of covers our approach to town centres. I also want to talk a little bit about supporting businesses, although it's slightly outside of my normal remit, but a number of colleagues have given me information to share, because I think it's stuff that it is important to share with this audience. So not only is this about the things you already know about through the COVID, various COVID related grants, and there's a whole programme of business support through that, but there's also other ongoing business support programmes. So we have programmes around skills development, we have programmes around property investment, and also about business growth, which may include equipment, may I think include property as well in certain circumstances. And these are very much aimed at small and medium-sized businesses. There's obviously a couple of links to the various information that's on the BCC website. There's also things that I know that Chris will be signposting you to in terms of opportunities through the LEP. And this is something that there'll be more opportunities for business support in certain sectors and for certain elements of business growth over quite a long period of time, linking back to this strategy of COVID recovery. Going back slightly to sort of my comfort zone here, going to talk a little bit about the Langley Sustainable Urban Extension, the residential scheme just off to the northeast of Sutton Coldfield, which was set out in the Birmingham Development Plan and has an adopted planning document as well as supplementary planning document that was adopted in April of, I was going to say last year then, what it was 2 years ago, isn't it? Yes. This COVID business has thrown me in terms of dates. I struggle to know what year it is, let alone what month some of the time. The Langley urban development helps Birmingham and the region meet some of its housing need. So it's proposed to accommodate around 6,000 new homes over the next 15 plus years. And we've been working with a consortium of landowners and partners to develop a planning application which will be submitted, I believe, over the summer. The date changes from time to time, with work on site commencing in the next 18 to 24 months. It's not just about housing, it's about leisure, education, supporting community uses, and really importantly, improved connectivity, so that we're not creating a dormitory on the edge of town. We're not creating a place to store people. We're creating a place where people can live. where people feel part of the surrounding community, and that's both in terms of day-to-day living, it's in terms of jobs, it's in terms of access to schools, and business opportunities, particularly connections into the town centre and to local shopping facilities. Another key project within our recovery strategy is the development at Pedimore, which I know David's going to talk a lot more on, as IM Properties are developing the site. The site's coming forward in line with, again, a master plan that was adopted 2 years ago. And key for the council here really is job creation, but also sustainable access. And in the same way as with Langley, new transport links are proposed to ensure that the development is accessible and that the surrounding areas are accessible from Langley and Pedimore. And there's also a whole range of supply chain opportunities, which I think David will comment more on. Just one final slide that I wanted to cover with you, and it's one that's close to my heart because I was involved in the bid for the city to host the Commonwealth Games. So during 2017, worked very closely with government and with the Commonwealth Games Federation. So the opportunities coming from the Games, I think, are really important, not just for Sutton. Actually, I'd be saying this wherever I was speaking, but you do have the advantage in Sutton of having a Games venue, which gives you a really good standing and opportunity. So I put on the slide £750 million investment. In fact, if you take into account investment in venues outside of Birmingham, so the aquatic centre at Sandwell, for example, we're talking about well over £1 billion worth of public sector investment coming into the city and the region. Even just down the road from you in Perry Bar, there's probably £750 million of public sector investment over the last, or over the sort of 2 years just gone and the next 12 months. So the Games is not just about a one-off event, it's about bringing a large amount of investment into the city. There's also a massive international audience. It's actually the third biggest international sporting event. For a lot of nations, this is their most important sporting event. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we'll also have a large audience in the venues and lots of people visiting the city. Alongside the Games event, there's a programme of cultural activities. So it's very much not just sport, it's other opportunities happening at the same time. We have a community fund for local organisations to host local activities. And importantly, there's also a business and tourism programme. I believe this is to be launched next month. And I understand that quite obviously it had to be significantly rethought because it was originally intended to be very much in person, with lots of people coming to Birmingham and having creating new connections across the Commonwealth. There's some really exciting ideas about how this will now work, and I think that's something that I'd really suggest you look out for and see how you can get involved. And just finally, the tagline, "Be bold, be Birmingham." This is something that we really want the city as a whole to live up to. It's a tagline that the council's starting to use, and actually there's so many opportunities for Birmingham to be bolder, to say more about itself, and our businesses are one of those real opportunities, and one of our key ambassadors as well. So that's really important. And on that point as well, the volunteering programme for the Games has also been launched today. So if that's something that you're interested, I just want to flag people. I've kind of gone through that relatively quickly, but I think that probably covers kind of a summary of what the council's approach to supporting COVID recovery, economic growth, inclusive economic growth across Sutton and in fact the wider city is. So thank you very much for listening. I'll pass back to Chris, and I'm obviously happy to pick up any questions following David's presentation, which I believe will follow on.
Nice stuff. Thanks, Becky. That was fantastic, and yeah, I think Be Bold, Be Birmingham's great, a great tagline, and then that sort of bring it on from the the wider Sutton plan is there's lots of things happening, isn't there, across the city and across within Sutton Coldfield as well, and that's a really important sort of tagline as you say, almost post-COVID, as you put it, which was quite a sort of a typical way to look at it. So no, and very true. So no, thank you, Becky. That's wonderful. And again, if you do have any questions, we'll come back on to that after our final speaker of the day, which is David Smith. Now, David joined us at our business fair, which is, I think, 2 years ago this week, I believe it would have been. Getting the years confused like Becky, but yeah, 2 years ago this week that David and the Iron Properties team joined us, and it's fantastic to have David with us here again today to talk about the Pedimore developments that are taking place, and that obviously form a really important part of the local economy and the local economic growth across the area, linked to all the other projects as well. So David, over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and good morning, everybody. Just bear with me a second whilst we set this up.
Yeah, good to go, David. Perfect.
Excellent. Good stuff. Right. Well, as you say, Chris, it's nearly 2 years, or coming up to 2 years, since I addressed a chamber audience like this. And many, including businesses no doubt attending this call, have faced enormous challenges. However, in those 2 years, we've continued to make progress to bring this hugely complex project forward, whilst also advancing, I'd have to say, a wide range of commitments to deliver wider positive returns for the area and the city as a whole. So we're getting to the point where we're really optimistic that there is now a clear path ahead in the short term, and we will finally break ground at Pedimore during the course of this summer. I'll come back to that a little bit later on, realising a huge milestone in this project's history, which, as Simon alluded to, has been difficult, but we are embracing opportunity, and certainly that's what this discussion hopefully will be about and going forwards. If I just do a brief reminder for those not familiar with the project, I'm conscious that not everybody would have been on this session several years ago. The project and the site lies to the northeast of Birmingham, east of the royal town of Sutton Coldfield, and is strategically well positioned to take advantage of the A38, the M42 and the M6 toll. More specifically, it lies to the north of Minworth and to the east of the proposed Langley urban extension, which you've just been hearing about, hopefully providing a good supply of labour in the fullness of time. The scheme itself comprises around 70 hectares of development land within a wider 110 hectare planning application boundary. The difference in the two is largely accounted for by the significant green infrastructure that wraps the project. It'll be home to between 5 and 10 industrial and logistics buildings, with around half the site specifically being protected for manufacturing uses. And that's a really important point and a key obligation that the city were keen for us to secure. The project will involve significant infrastructure, be that highways or utilities, along with appropriately designed and sustainable buildings and other elements which will help make sure that the project is a best-in-class economic asset for the city and a great place to work. Here you can see the latest master plan, which has evolved in a number of areas, partly as a consequence of some of the discussions we've been having with a prospective occupier, which in our view has only improved it further from the initial layout. Specific improvements include enhancing the site entrance, which is difficult to see on a plan of this scale, and also the introduction of further green corridors between a number of the units on the site, replicating the north-south Pedimore Brook, realigned Pedimore Brook corridor, which we have through the centre of the scheme. It has also allowed us to reduce some of the visual impacts of some of the larger buildings. So we're pleased that we're moving in the right direction rather than going backwards and having to undermine or undo some of the commitments that we previously made. Earlier, I touched on our wider commitments that form part of the bid to the City Council, which then responds to its business charter for social responsibility, Of most relevance are the pillars relating to local employment, partners in community, green and sustainable, and of course, buy local, which is one of the reasons I'm here today. The successful delivery of a number of these will be contingent on effective working relationships with a number of strategic partners that we've formed over the last few years. And whilst they too have had their challenges, our dialogue has continued throughout that period. Our commitments are extensive, and of course they span the life of the project, but we think that we've made meaningful progress even before we start on site. So more of that shortly. So where are we now? Behind the scenes, there's been a huge amount of project planning underway. It's been frustrating that we haven't been able to get to site before now, and that is in large part due to the pandemic, but also ongoing progress with technical issues that we've had to deal with. This will all ensure that the enabling works are agreed, power to the site can be delivered on time, and significant highway upgrades, in particular to the A38, are programmed to cause least disruption to the local area. And juggling all of these is no mean feat during the present climate. More publicly, we've been progressing with our statutory approvals, and most recently, which a number of the participants may have seen, have been modifying and tweaking some of the existing consents that we have to allow us to respond to a significant occupier requirement. And in this regard, we've recently submitted a detailed application for what we know as Unit B, a logistics building of over 200,000 square metres across multiple floors. The lower two images on this slide demonstrate this building in its context, both from the site entrance, but also from the realigned Pedimore Brook to the east of the building. We're also currently finalising our plans for the building at the site entrance, which is known as Unit A, which can accommodate industrial or logistics uses. Images of this building are shown at the top of the slide, and we hope to be submitting these plans shortly. Between them, we estimate that these two buildings could support in the order of 2,000 jobs. In terms of our wider commitments, a brief note on these. The Pedimore Community Fund continues to support projects in the local and wider area, and this has been supplemented in recent months with our own fundraising to support community organisations which have been particularly challenged during the pandemic. Our financial and pro bono support is benefiting an increasing number of diverse organisations, including those across the local geography, a number of which you can see on the slide here. Alongside our existing arrangements, and in recognition of the disproportionate impact the pandemic is likely to have on some communities in North Birmingham, in the last year we've forged new partnerships which will seek to ensure that business and residents can access the opportunities that this and other notable developments in the area will bring. The North Birmingham Economic Recovery Task Force will soon be launching its online resources to help channel and connect need with opportunity. And we're pleased to support this initiative, which we hope will better disseminate the opportunities arising from Pedimore. Looking forward, our principal milestones look like this. Whilst we have applications ongoing, in order to allow us to hit the ground running, we are close to appointing the lead contractor for the initial phase of construction works at Pedimore. And I'm really pleased to say that we hope to confirm Winvic Construction Limited as that lead contractor for the infrastructure works due to commence this summer. Members of the Winvic team have joined this update session and will be joining me in the networking session afterwards. Beyond infrastructure, we expect to be on site with the first building in early 2022, with first occupations taking place in 2023. We talk a lot about opportunity, and our bid commitments under the Charter are very clear that we see responsibility to deliver the widest possible benefits to the citizens and businesses of Birmingham. In many respects, the delay in getting to site may have helped. This last year has really shone a light on the role of business to support the communities in which it invests. And this has been, frankly, a mantra of the IAM Properties business for as long as I've been in post, seeking to work out how we can focus our efforts, our purchasing power, activities and actions to realise more positive outcomes in our projects. And we're learning lessons all the time, including most recently from our Strategic Employment Park project at Junction 11, Mercia Park of the M42. And I'm sure we'll bring some of these learnings to Pedimore. In construction, there will be opportunities arising from the day we break ground to the completion of the last building on site. It's estimated that the project will deliver a £100 million increase in productivity across the lifetime of the build. The construction phase will yield opportunities in sourcing of products, materials and services, all of which can help sustain and grow existing businesses within the local area. And of course, this also aligns with the more environmentally sustainable development objectives, seeking to reduce vehicle miles of both materials and labour. It's important, however, that we are transparent, I think, with the parameters that we put on our buy local activity. Our priority is the Birmingham administrative area, including of course, the royal town of Sutton Coldfield, but more generally, we don't preclude an emphasis within a 30-mile radius of the site and beyond for specialist activities. It goes without saying that availability, track record, competency, quality, pricing, and ability to support our wider social value commitments will all form an element of the procurement in construction process, and we're communicating that with Winvic. In operation, there will be opportunities with greater longevity, but perhaps fewer opportunities. But this is really the area where there's the greatest social return on investment. Our influence here will be to work with the occupiers and demonstrate to them how they can support our agenda and your agenda. Hopefully we can work with them to demonstrate the value in terms of procuring locally, supporting the environmental footprint, supporting businesses, and therefore businesses supporting communities in turn. We're already having lengthy conversations with the likes of the managing agents of potential scheme here to ensure that we don't miss the opportunity in the management of the estate in realising our contributions to the long-term running of the project. Turning briefly to some specifics, I've set out on this slide the principal design and works packages associated with the prospective infrastructure contract. It's certainly not my intention to discuss these at length because it's beyond my capability, but I just wanted to trail the broad scope of works and their associated contract period. As you can see, they're largely categorised as earthworks, groundworks, highways, drainage, lighting, new footbridge, landscaping, street furniture, utilities, and small-scale structures. And alongside all of these works will be provision of goods and services which are typically required to accommodate a construction contract of this scale, such as catering, cleaning, security, etc. So the big question is, how might one access these opportunities? So this slide summarises the anticipated process for interested businesses. It's not yet firmed up, hence it's a draft protocol, and will undoubtedly evolve as we continue to discuss with Winvic over the coming weeks and with other partners as well, the most appropriate routes to place opportunities. It does, however, give you a sense of the process that the lead contractor is being asked to go through and is keen to go through, I should stress that. One of the notable uncertainties at this point in time is how we'll carry out our second Meet the Buyer event, the first being held in the town hall, the city council 2 years ago. I think much is going to depend on that, on the continued success or otherwise in the further easing of lockdown measures. I'd love to be able to do it face to face, as I'm sure Winvic would. That's how the new relationships are best formed as opposed to virtually. But that may be the route we have to go down, subject to the coming few weeks. So that's really, Chris and all attendees, an overview of where we are. I would encourage people to keep their eye on social media in the coming days and weeks, either through our channels, the Pedimore website, your channels indeed. I'm sure you'll retweet or cover some of our activity, or the email address that's listed or shown on the slide here, which is a Pedimore specific address. I hope that's a useful overview of where we are 2 years on. We're probably a year behind, but isn't everybody? And hopefully we can now get on with the job of realising some of those opportunities.
Wonderful, thank you, David. No, that's great, and a really good good update, and yes, it's 2 years on rather than a year that was hoped, but yeah, sounds like there's some really good opportunities moving forward, and I think that sort of brings together, that wider, the local sort of link and the local engagement from the Sutton Town Council, and then through Birmingham Council, and then yeah, of course, the importance of actual construction projects and actual projects that are that are really starting to move forward, which is great. So thank you, David, appreciate it. We're looking okay time wise. We'll have a Q&A for sort of 10-15 minutes, then we'll have a break at 1:45. So I suppose the first is to open up questions. If there is people in the meeting that do want to start putting in questions into the chat box, by all means do so. I suppose I was keen to bring in, I know we have David and Simon. I know Becky's having trouble with her Wi-Fi, so we'll probably keep the questions to Simon and David unless Becky can sort her connection out. But I suppose the key one probably back to Simon to start with is obviously Pedimore is that project that is very much moving forward. You mentioned about getting those easier wins quite quickly. How important is that to people's perception of these really positive projects, and I suppose just give us a bit of an insight into the work that goes into that.
Yeah, I think thank you. I think if we look at the town, if I sort of strict my marks to the town centre, say for now, which is no comment on what David said, because there's a lot of good stuff in there and a lot of good stuff about all the things that I am putting into the community locally and more generally. I think in terms of when you've got big projects that need to move and that sort of need to move in a certain order, then there are inevitably complexities, because these things are commercial as well as they are kind of part of a bigger plan as well, which is why the Red Rose Centre is a really interesting opportunity in the context. Of course, Birmingham City Council spent the best part of 13 million quid, I think, buying it. So and it's in their pension fund, so they will need to make it a commercial deal. But equally, they are in a position where they're the planning authority and the asset owner. So that is a really positive, easier, I'm not going to say easy, but easier win to go for. Whereas I think and I mentioned it, and people might want to talk about it as well, Aldi is probably almost at the other end of the spectrum. You've got Aldi wanting to come into Sutton, wanting to increase their presence in the town centre. They're going to relocate from their new Hall Walks and go on to Brassington, which is brilliant, because Suttonians on this call will know that that's a site that I've lived in Sutton for 22 years or whatever. It's been empty for longer than that. But equally, we need to make sure that it fits in with the overall objectives of the master plan. And a number of people have raised that with me, and that's what we and BCC are committed to making sure happens.
Yeah, and I think that's the importance, as you say, about that master plan, is that that's the document that we're all working to now, and that's the that's the key, isn't it? And that brings into that thought, and having some of those projects move forward will certainly help that process as as things do move forward, and it's really good to hear that. So no, thank you, Simon. There was a question coming from Naeem Arif, one of our Sutton Executive Committee members, for Simon. So the investment projects into Sutton, are those outcomes linked to payment, as in, are they sort of more results based in terms of what happens with those projects? Just give us a bit of an idea around investment into the project.
Can I just explain that a little bit, Simon? Sorry, just because I thought explaining it better. So what I'm thinking is, obviously, let's say we spend £1,000 on a consultant to do a piece of work, and then some of those outcomes might not be for a year, 2 or 3 years. Any thought gone into that? How we maybe pay some of that money based on those benefits being realised?
Yeah, that's. I think I got that. That's a really good private sector discipline, which I'm not sure you can necessarily completely. So I identify with that with my day job, Howard. Completely translate across into the town centre. I think it it works in certain of the projects where there is that kind of more obvious commercial linkage between expenditure and outcome, but actually some of the projects are much more sort of overarching. So when I talk about the transport and highway stuff, for example, that is a public sector is always going to have to pay for that, be it the kind of the road stuff, or be it the transport hub or whatever. So those are more sort of, I think, investments by the public sector. But I do take your point that, you know, in terms of some of the smaller stuff, then it's easier to kind of create that linkage to outcome.
Thanks, Simon, and thanks for that question. Naomi, yes, if there is any further ones, please do put them in the chat. I wanted to bring in David in regards to some of the real positives that have come from the project so far, with that, you know, the community link and some of the figures. So I suppose that must be a really positive part of your project, David, you know, in preparation for the absolute the absolute end of the project, which is getting the areas built, but continuing and starting that community area first, even linked to the pandemic, must have been a positive for the business.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, a lot of success is built from relationships, isn't it? And knowing who you're working with, and that works both ways, and people understanding what we're all about and what we can do to support the communities in which we're investing, which, as I said, is a real mantra of the business. It's not always as easy as it sounds, and we're going to find, no doubt, going forwards, that, you know, we're stretched even further to deliver. But I guess those 2 years have allowed us to get to know. We haven't stopped our sort of social value activity. It's an overused word, but it's what it is really, in terms of engaging with a wide range of community partners. That in the main, except the face-to-face stuff, we've still been able to do, and being able to offer support and resource and experience virtually to a wide range of organisations, as well as the community fund, which was topped up as part of just a general pandemic fund. So the parameters were loosened to support any third sector, social enterprise or voluntary organisation that really needed support. So yeah, it has been a productive couple of years on that front before we even hit the ground. And you might say, well, those relationships will extend throughout the build and endure, hopefully, throughout the build. Yeah,
and that long-term and long-standing thing is really important. Yeah, as you say, hopefully bear fruit as the build continues. So no, thank you, David. Wonderful. A few more questions coming in. So I wanted to bring in, there's a question from Daniel Anderson. Good afternoon, Daniel. For Simon, which is, the parade setup is currently heavily retail biased. What is the vision for the parade area, including the Rose Centre redevelopment, as resale seems to be declining further? So yeah, over to Simon, and we'll probably bring in Becky on that, and then another question from Anne-Marie. So Simon, over to you.
Brilliant, thanks, Chris. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, absolutely spot on. I think the parade is too heavily retail focused, and we shouldn't beat ourselves up over that. There's lots of parades that are too heavily retail focused across the country. I think we're fortunate in that we have a town centre that will and is already, we can see property owners, investors, moving around the town centre, wanting to invest in the town centre. If you think about what a town centre is going to be, and Becky talked about this in terms of shop local, and again, you can become a massive geek on this. There's a thing called the 15-minute town, which is really interesting, and I'd urge people to kind of Google it. That's what you want to become effectively going forward. So it's a town centre where people live, where they spend more of their leisure time. Yes, they'll shop there, but they might shop there in a slightly different way. One of the great things that I didn't get a chance to talk about too much, and people on this call might have heard me bang on about it endlessly, is our park as well. We're so fortunate that Sutton Coldfield has the park that it does, but it's so close to the town centre. When we started out on this journey, we got a guy called Bill Grimsey, who's a sort of guru on town centres, to come and spend some time with us. And he just couldn't believe the opportunity that we had there. It's absolutely something that we can be famous for as well. So I think you're right, Daniel. I think it needs to be different. It will have less retail. In a horrible way, it's getting less retail at the moment because it's almost sort of self-selecting, frankly, as units go and as occupancy drops. And that's not good. And that's why we need to act on this.
Absolutely. No. Thank you, Simon. And coming on to Anne-Marie's question, which just sort of go along and move forward from that a little bit, and bring Becky in on this. Anne-Marie, who I know owns the Simpsons Gym Bar up on Lichfield Road. So has thought being given to meanwhile uses while the supplementary planning agreement is going through. The expansion of hospitality into pavement space recently has added a real vibrancy onto Birmingham Road. Are there any thoughts for more of this in other areas? And the public realm side is key to that, isn't it, Becky?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, what Simon's just said about diversity of uses kind of flows really nicely into this. There's almost two levels to work at here, and they're completely interrelated. There's the long-term vision and what those uses are going to be, and they need to be more diverse. We need to include healthcare, we need to include things for children and young people, we need to include things for older people, we need to include shops, services. People need to be able to access what they want in the town centre, but we also need, that really includes entertainment and leisure, and opportunities for people to just stop and have a coffee or stop and chat to someone in a pleasant environment, things that just make you stop and think, or join in with something you hadn't intended to. So I think there's lots of opportunity for meanwhile uses, some of which might then grow into more permanent uses, some of which might be, for example, small business spaces where people can test out a new idea, and if that works, then maybe they move into the Grace Church or into the redeveloped Red Rose or elsewhere. So absolutely think meanwhile uses, pop-up uses, however we want to define them, and flexible spaces to accommodate those uses is what's really important, whether that's a public square with some seating, or whether actually they're meanwhile uses within what are currently vacant units. What can we do with some of the vacant shops in the Grace Church or in the Red Rose for the short term that enables people to do a bit more? And also, as Simon has said a couple of times, the park is an absolutely unique opportunity for Sutton Coldfield, and anything that draws the attraction of the park through into the centre, so maybe small areas of green space that actually create an attractive environment, have some signposting, and I don't necessarily mean like physically a signpost, but some information about things in the park that draw people out to the park, and that also contribute to tackling climate change as well, and perhaps more sustainable approach to water management and things like that. There's actually quite a lot of public realm in Sutton, and it could be it will be so very much better. So absolutely, I think someone's also put a question about the planning environment supported, as Anne-Marie again. The planning environment supporting the flexible uses, absolutely yes. I think that, I mean, there are changes proposed to the planning system, and there are recent changes to the planning system that have increased flexibility around town centre uses. Some of that will be useful, some of it might not be. So we do need to be careful about the extent of flexibility, and ensuring that all of the various partners in Sutton can jointly provide the right environment. So it's not just a planning environment, it's the investment environment, it's the other businesses in the area, but absolutely small business space and opportunities for people to use spaces in the short term are things that the City Council is really supportive of, and that we're looking at not just in Sutton but elsewhere as well.
Yeah, and I think, Becky, as you say, knowing various different spaces across Birmingham is, some perhaps are better at doing that than others, and it's about learning from those other spaces and those other areas. So
it's across Birmingham and elsewhere, because it's important to look at comparators and as much as anything else to see what you don't want to do or what you don't want to happen as much as what you do want to happen. So there's lots of really good examples.
Great stuff. Thanks, Becky. Wonderful. Thank you. And I wanted to come on to a further question.
Chris, sorry, Chris, can I just jump in and make a couple of quick comments there? Just really to say, I guess, on behalf of the town council and residents, I mean, the hospitality business in Sutton Coldfield has done amazing things. I know it has across the country, but we're allowed to be parochial here. That Birmingham Road is fantastic. You got Pizza by Golly, everybody's really looking to take advantage of that space. So I hope that's something that we can all find a way to work going forward, and you know, that we can eat local, go out local, as well as shop local. And just on meanwhile use as well, I just you know, I get lots of emails, which is, again, is another example of how you know, committed Suttonians are about meanwhile use. And just in the last week, I've had suggestions of converting a unit into a bike store. I've had suggestions around, and this is vaguely ironic, but you can see it as a town centre click and collect presence as well. So I think, you know, it's good to hear Becky say that, because meanwhile use, we already have an art gallery in British Home Stores at the moment as well. But there is still too much vacant space, and some of the things that we've talked about are going to take a longer time. So, you know, meanwhile use is absolutely something we'll push on. Thanks, Chris. Sorry.
Absolutely, no, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, and certainly agree with your sentiments around the hospitality industry. Yeah, in Sutton and across many areas, and certainly with Anne-Marie, I know has worked incredibly hard with her business to keep it working as well as it can during the pandemic. So thank you, Simon. We'll come on to a final question for David, more on the procurement side. So from Natasha Smith, who are an LED lighting company based in Birmingham. Where, yeah, when it is sort of confirmed, you know, I suppose, yeah, how is best to go onto that? It's through that portal, isn't it, David? And really keep an eye on your channels and lots of other channels to make sure you're top of the list when that comes on.
Absolutely, and we know Flick. So I've just reassured Natasha that we obviously had contact with you a few years ago. You're very much on the system as it is at the moment, and we've certainly passed those details on to the lead contractor, and there's definitely a conversation to at least understand capability and so on and so forth. So yeah, no, that's noted, publicly noted. We'll take that one away.
Great stuff. No, thank you, David. And really, again, I think I suppose you look at the exciting parts of what's coming is those, you know, those procurement opportunities for businesses, and as we move out of the pandemic and these projects start to move forward at probably an even bigger pace, is great. And probably just to finish on that, David, is that the case? Is it now moving forward even quicker perhaps than it would have been with the year break, because you're, you know, as a business, it's such an important part of, you know, of the development? Is that really sort of full steam ahead where possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, the longer we hang around, the more you have your capital tied up in something. So yeah, we need to progress. We've made commitments at the outset to speculatively build a proportion of floor space anyway. So we always knew we were going to be progressing reasonably quickly in the early phases. Occupier demand, it's a sensitive issue because obviously some of that occupier demand is retail related. And that's the flip side of obviously some of the challenges that the high street has had, that we've been hearing from Simon and Becky earlier on. So yeah, it's an exciting time, and we're just keen to be able to contribute and start putting something back. Yeah.
Sounds great. Okay, David, wonderful. Well, no, thanks for all those questions, and it really is a pleasure to have everyone on the call today. So we'll call a sort of an end to the initial proceedings and the recorded part of the webinar. So from that side, a huge thank you to our speakers, Simon, David, Becky, for the Sutton Town Council, for Birmingham Council, and for Iron Properties for their support of this webinar. It's really interesting to hear those updates, and I'm sure in years to come there'll be events like this wherever we may end up, whether it be in person or online, to continue that update. And we look forward to working with you all to promote that as a chamber.